Morning, it's a beautiful day and we're live from Kampala Serena Conference Center. Today is a beautiful day. It's day 2 of the national dialogue that is about empowering the children, looking at the education, the resilience we need to sail through the education spectrum. And not only that, but even the children. It's a conversation we started yesterday and it's still ongoing. Be a part of this conversation online on the Twitter handle and the YouTube handle and Facebook of NTV Uganda, and you'll be a part of this conversation. This conversation is brought to you by World Vision, Save the Children. We have UNICEF, Oxfam, and of course organized by EWAD. And that is education for advocacy, quality education for advocacy. I think I'll have Mr. Kabir talk about that. It's day 2 of this conversation. Yesterday we handled a couple of issues and I want to thank all those who are part of this conversation. Today we are scaling up the conversation at the different level, and we have a great panelists and stakeholders at different levels, and they'll be joining us on Zoom. But with me in studio, I have Mr. Henry Semakula from the Ministry of Education and Sports here with us. Good morning, Mr. Semakula.
Good morning, Mr. Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
How does it feel?
Feels very fine because we are here to really check the future of our children. We want to open it up to everybody. We discuss and see how best we can really get back to school despite all the effects of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And still we have the technical advisor from the Advocacy for Quality Education, Mr. Kaboyo Patrick. Mr. Kaboyo Patrick, this is day 2.
Yes.
You as the organizer, where do you see this conversation? Are we making the mind-provoking kind of sequence to the powers that be?
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, viewers and listeners and those online. I think from the education advocacy with the difference platform and our members, day 1 was excellent because we were able to have the Honorable Minister of State for Children and Youth open officially, and that has a policy implication that her communication immediately feeds into our issues of follow-up. But also the Director for Basic and Secondary Education, Haji Mulindwa, was clear, giving hope, and to us, this sets the conversation for where we want to be. Our partners, World Vision, Oxfam, UNICEF, and International Aid Services, are all eager to see and listen what is going to come out of day 2. I'm optimistic that with the honorable members of parliament coming on board and other technocrats, we are going to sail through a good conversation.
Perfect. That is a conversation. And online, I have a couple of people joining this conversation. It's about the future of children and education in Uganda, how we find the resilience, and not only that, how we deal with the realities in the wake of COVID-19 and the lockdown. Now, joining us this early morning to give us the opening remarks, we have Mr. Tereraho John from the World Vision Uganda to give us the opening remarks. Mr. Tereraho, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew Chamajero.
You are live. Give us the opening remarks, sir.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, our dear members of parliament, colleague, the panelists today, and participants. I want to welcome you to day 2 of the National Dialogue on the Future of Education and the future of our children. We are continuing to put our heads together on the theme, education amidst COVID, reflections of the past, realities of the present, and perspectives of the future. And today, we are going to focus on the sub-theme, harnessing the power of parliament for continuity of learning. Friends, yesterday we got reflections and perspectives from the Ministry of Gender, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Education. And we were blessed to have the Minister of State for Youth and Children opening the dialogue. It is very clear to all of us that we are dealing with a completely new situation. We are dealing with a situation where any mistake will cost lives. But it is also important for us to recognize that any delay in action would be very costly in the long run. It will cost us a future of a whole generation for this country. Ultimately, the cost of our inaction would be much higher than the cost of action now. The operating context is challenging and is completely different from what we are used to. We cannot depend on the traditional and conventional methods of education service delivery. It is a new normal, and we must challenge ourselves to adopt the new normal, to innovate, to think hard, to think differently, so that we can change the way we do business. All this costs money, it costs a lot of time, it costs a lot of commitment. Today we are glad to have our legislature and members of the executive arms of government to lead our dialogue about the future of education and the future of our children in this country. Our members of parliament will help us understand their preparedness to secure the future of our children. We shall also have our interministerial panel on the planning for education generally and continuity of learning specifically. The justification, friends, for engaging our members of parliament is that at a global level, World Vision and partners have been working together to produce the counting pennies. This is a report to track how much money is invested into child well-being. Last year, World Vision worked with partners and did some kind of assessment, some kind of budget responsiveness. And this study found out that only 5.2% FY 2021 budget went to addressing child-specific sectors. And yet, as you know, colleagues, children in this country compose 56% of the national population. As I said, the sub-theme for today is financing and implementing strategies for education continuity. And we shall understand the appropriation, the planning, implementation, and accountability mechanisms that have been set in place for securing the future of our children. I want to take this opportunity to welcome the members of parliament that have responded to this call, and they are here to take us through. I also want to appreciate the availability of our interministerial team that are responsible for planning. They are from the Ministry of Education, of the Ministry of Gender, and the National Planning Authority. So today we shall put our heads together to understand the direction we need to take to secure the future of our children. And friends, our future, our children, our future, and our future, our children. I take this opportunity on behalf of the partners to welcome everyone on board and to open today's session. Thank you very much for God and my country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tereraho John from the World Vision Uganda, our key partner in this, and all those that are part of this. Now, the conversation today, we are looking at financing education continuity. And today we are looking at the legislators who are at the forefront of making and framing policies that help and laws that help to expedite this. Now, to start off this, I want to start off with Honorable Dr. Charles Ayume, who happens to be the chairperson, Health Committee of Parliament of Uganda. Honorable Charles, good morning. Honorable Ayume,
Hello?
can you hear me?
Andrew and Henry, over to you.
You can hear me, Honorable? Honorable Ayume, can you hear me? Honorable, unmute your mic on your gadget. Unmute your mic, Honorable.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I can hear you. A very good morning, Honorable.
Good morning, Andrew.
Okay. Now, Honorable, the Parliament of Uganda has 4 major rules, if I can bring it closer, mainly appropriation, legislation, representation, and oversight. Now, from where you are, what resource mobilization strategy does the Parliament of Uganda have in place to support government with adequate resources to buy more vaccines?
Thank you very much, Andrew. As we all know that vaccines is the solution, it's the way forward. It's a long-term intervention. What we are doing now, the knee-jerk reactions are just emergency measures. So we are giving it priority as a government. I think you've seen huge budget cuts across all sectors. Parliament has not been spared, budget cuts on travel. So as government, we are looking within our own pool of resources. What we have been able to save by not implementing during COVID, conferences, travel, and so many other things. The Ministry of Finance has been able to pick up some resources from there. Of course, redirection of some resources from our internal revenue and the goodwill of donors. I think we should be able to pick up adequate resources to procure these vaccines. But again, I must say that for the time being, the vaccines we had received as a country previously were donations. We had not really spent on them.
Parliament passed the health insurance scheme. Will the scheme cover learners in schools? And the other thing I want to know, how do we get the bill assented to?
There were still some the bill needed some refining here and there. And one of the issues I think the 10th Parliament was grappling with was the issue of the premiums that were payable. You already know that 15% is paid for NSSF. The employer brings 5%, and the employer brings 10%, the employee brings 5%. And the same money is going to be, initially they were talking about 8%. Now that could be a deterrent to potential investors where you have to pay 4% and the employee pays 4%. So I think there were still negotiations with, imagine if you're knocking off 5% from an employee's salary and another 4% for the national health insurance bill. So those are the areas of contention, and that's why there was back and forth between the sector and Parliament before they could close the deal on what premium would make employees comfortable and also not scare investors. But in the broad term, I think the executive has agreed that the spirit of the national health insurance scheme is good. Parliament is actually at the forefront. They want it as soon as yesterday. And the public, wherever we go, we've been, the sentiments are we need a national health insurance scheme. Yes, it will cover dependents of the beneficiaries. I mean, the people who are paying the premium, there's a certain number that your dependents will be catered in your policy. And that, of course, goes down to the children and then the indigents.
How best can Ugandans tap into that kind of opportunity? And what strategy does the government have to make the masses understand how it's going to cover everything health-wise?
Andrew, I think we are among the very few countries that has not had a national health insurance policy. And we are in the 21st century. This is something we need to embrace. The advantages are many. This gap we are seeing in resources for the health sector, one of the advantages of a national health insurance scheme is you're able to generate a lot of resources. If you do the mathematics, the resources are astronomical, and the gap that we are getting from the consolidated fund can be augmented by the National Health Insurance Scheme. Take about how much NSSF, how much is in their financial pool, how much is in their kitty. The National Health Insurance Scheme will be able to raise a lot of resources. Number two, it will be able to put all these quack health facilities that we cannot ably regulate, all these nooks that are in these funny slums and people are doing unethical things, people are dropping placentas in pit latrines, injections in domestic waste. Before you are accredited, this scheme will have an inspectorate department that will come down to do inspection of your facility with a checklist, and automatically you'll put health facilities into line so that they are able to conform to modern medical practices and ethical medical practices. We have seen the community already take a lead in community health insurance. You've seen that Bushenyi area, Ishaka, then I think around Kisoro, there are community health insurance schemes, and these have really shown that insurance can work. The community has gone ahead, and government, I think we have been a bit slow. So we really need to implement this policy.
Much Honorable Dr. Ayume there. He made such very remarkable statements there. I love the fact that the policy and the bill, it's looking at, covering quite a big number of the entire population. Semakola is going to handle the other panelist who is actually online. Honorable, I really want to thank you for your time. Before you go, you have something?
Maybe Andrew, just to say that some people may be wondering what of the people who are not in
the informal sector people,
destitutes. Yes, the informal sector people, destitutes and all that. Destitutes will do an approximation, and then the government will do a capitation and put money for them, but pay it to the National Health Insurance Scheme. So all those will be, there are those people who you cannot track, but like there'll be some statistical projections to cater for those people. It's also an opportunity right now for the public health sector to put certain systems in order. As you're aware, there's a team that has just come back from the field, the National COVID Task Force of Parliament, and there have been glaring gaps in the sector. But we're reliably informed that some of those issues, CT scans, MRIs, the ministry intends to put them in their 5-year strategic plan. As this scheme comes into place, the onus now is upon the public health system to conform and give us what is expected at regional level. Local government has put up the cities in place, but these cities also have to come with service points. One of the crucial service points is the health sector. We cannot have people coming from Koboko, from Kabong, from Kisoro to come to the center for cancer treatment, to come to the center for neuro treatment, to come to the center for heart services. So as chairman of the Health Service Committee, one of the things in the next 1 year or 2 years, I don't know how long I'll last there, is to see that we decentralize a number of these specialized treatment to regional levels. It helps the common man instead of coming 150, 400 kilometers away to seek a service. And then they tell you, come back for review in a week's time. So you cannot go back to Koboko, you cannot go back to Kabong and come back. It's 50,000 one way. That's 100,000 two way. So this bill you're asking about, it has to move in tandem with the preparedness of the health sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Honorable Charles Ayume. He has made remarks. One thing that is beautiful about it is that children are covered, whether destitute or those from the organized communities. We are joined by very eminent MPs who will be sharing with you very soon where they're coming from. But the other panelists, allow me, my colleague Semakula, to take on. I love the conversation from the Honorable Minister.
I also do like the conversation from the Honorable Member
Chair.
of Parliament, Chair of the Health Committee. He gives us assurances that budget has been considered. Although my worry is that the cutting of budgets in some of these subsectors is also going to cause some trouble in certain corners.
Of course.
Otherwise, we want to thank Honorable Ayume so much for, and also for assuring us that government is continuously reallocating resources to ensure that we go through the pandemic. So thank you very much. Just like Andrew has stated, we have 4 honorable members of parliament on the panel today. And I'm glad to introduce Honorable Flavia Kabahenda Rwabhororo, the Chair Committee of Parliament for Gender. And as we all know, the issues of COVID are multi-sectoral. Everybody has a corner to touch.
Indeed.
So this panel here brings to us various reflections from different corners. Honorable, you are welcome.
Thank you.
I want to inform you that I'll give you about 10 minutes and allow you to use the first minute to tell us more about yourself, because we need to know a little more about you and your constituency. But then the next 8 to 9 minutes can be used by you to give the highlights of the concerns you've come to address. I'll have 2 questions for you, and I'll do one at a time.
Okay.
So when you've completed the responses to the first one, I'll indicate that the second one is starting. Honorable, as you introduce yourself, let me prepare for your first question. Let's have you tell us more about yourself before we
Thank you very much, Mr. Semakula, and I thank the moderator. I thank NTV for hosting me this morning. I am Kabahenda Flavia Rwabhororo, and I'm very deliberate about the order of my names, because that is the order in which I acquired them.
Oh, yes.
So I am the chairperson of the Committee on Gender, Labour and Social Development, and I am a returnee. I was in the 9th Parliament and now in the 11th. And in the 11th Parliament, I was the chairperson of the Committee on Tourism, Trade and Industry. But I was the publicity secretary for the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Children. And I was the Early Childhood Development Champion. And also I was the inaugural chairperson of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, for which I took over the advocacy and policy advisor during the recession. And so today I come with a passion.
And I can see that you also come with a wealth of knowledge from all corners of the government. And so we really expect a lot from you. Honorable, I want to take you on to the question, our first question. How is Parliament going to respond to the increasing cases of teenage pregnancy and child marriage? Obviously, these ones will impact the continuity that we are talking about. If I may even be a little specific, there are regions that have really been identified as being very bad off in terms of teenage pregnancy. Karamoja region, Busoga region, yes, Iganga, West Nile. I've seen members crying from that side. So could you give your highlights on these very many cases? And much as government seems to have allowed the young girls who have become pregnant at this time to get back to school, we don't also see this forthcoming. The floor is yours, Honorable.
Thank you very much. I think on a general notice is that the children in Uganda, like in any other countries that have been hit by this pandemic, are hidden victims of the COVID-19 pandemic. They don't only contract COVID, but they also suffer immensely. They are severely impacted victims of this COVID-19. And it's unfortunate that most of what they go through is unnoticed by us, the parents, and also the other stakeholders. And therefore, that for me becomes the key thing that equally affects the girl child. Actually, the girl child could easily be the most affected if we went in depth. But I know that there are a lot of factors playing at the girls' side, or the women for that matter, that the COVID pandemic has come with the standard operating procedures. Because when you distance, when you emphasize social distancing, actually it is the girl that gets distanced the more. Because this girl solves most of her problems by interaction, by being close to people who can give advice. Even in their bodies, they experience a lot of transitions that don't necessarily need them to distance at all. And so most of the soaps that you will talk about will end up actually making this girl the victim other than actually protecting them. When you talk about this girl not leaving home to go to towns, to trading centers, then you are basically telling this girl not to access sanitary pads, because most of these issues are found in the towns and the trading centers where she has been stopped from going. And also for her to access, if they needed, family planning, reproductive health education, and other services that really are very crucial and special to the girls. So when we go to the girls, even the homes where the girls are have now become a trap, because they were safer actually staying in school than staying home. We know for a fact that most of the abuses that are happening to the girls come from their closest relatives and closest people. And so the closest we are talking about is this home. And at home, we have registered incest, we have registered defilement, we have registered abuse, we have registered violence, we have registered poverty. You know, children are never poor. It is the households that are poor. So children living in poor households is is a very great problem to the girl child, because in most cases their needs, the unique needs, may not be as patient as you want them to do. So we have now registered girls who will look out to find solutions for themselves when others are not noticing. And that is when they end up in traps. And so it is as bad as that. There is a lot of violence taking place. There is a lot of sexual abuse taking place. There is a lot taking place in the homes. And the first thing that we should look at is the household. It is the first line of intervention in everything we want to talk about, be it moral or financial or whatever you want to talk about. The household is the key instrument that we need to address as not only politicians, but every one of us as stakeholders in this country. We have a lot of mothers and fathers and not parents. Because the boarding school syndrome has deprived us of parenting. Most of these girls are born of abused mothers who don't know what to do because they bore them when they were young. And now they have these young girls growing up. They did not get the chance to be talked to and be made ready for whatever they go through as transitions. And so we have a great challenge because we lost the tradition of having these girls talked to before they transit to the different levels biologically, so that they can get ready for whatever comes and be able to even dodge or avoid or send it off. We had a community that really cared. The child belonged, was everybody's business. Every child in the community was everyone's business. Today, it's not the case, because a lot of things have come about, including what we call urbanization, which actually has compromised on the traditional interventions by communities towards the children of that community. And so the girl has ended up a victim of this pandemic by suffering abuse in home, suffering abuse in the community, suffering mental torture and physical torture And at the end of the day, whoever offers a kind of sympathy, when actually this person wants to take advantage, find themselves with this girl. So in my district in Kyegegwa, you know, we have a lot of unrecorded things here in Uganda.
Yeah, data is a
A
problem.
lot of unrecorded things. Because you may think it is in Karamoja, it is where, but in my district in Kyegegwa, in the last COVID time, in 6 months, 3,837 girls had been defiled. And those are the ones who had reported. I know so much happened in those homes, especially in as far as incest is concerned. So this is the second pandemic that we have. The sexual and gender-based violence is the new pandemic now. And if we are not careful, we are going to permanently damage our shared future. So the teenage pregnancies are coming out of all those kind of unresolved issues that are coming around COVID. And you know, it was even earlier that the parents neglected talking to their children. They left the children to the teachers at school, which teachers only were concentrating on passing exams and not necessarily passing on moral and ethical
Yes, I can see that Honorable really has a lot of information around the girl child.
Oh, yes.
I would also like to indicate to her that the boy child is also suffering silently.
You know?
much as we prefer to concentrate more on the effect of the girl child.
Yeah.
And Honorable, you're very right. Out there, the girl suffers most, especially when it comes to issues of growth and development. She needs some people to open up to, and now everybody is locked in different sides, and so on and so forth. But thank you very much.
And if I may add a little thing.
Yes.
You may think that this girl is supposed to open up to the mother or the relatives. No, not necessarily. Everyone has a confidant.
Sure.
True.
Someone may even be your relative but not your friend.
Sure.
So this girl may have picked on a certain teacher to be their friend. Now they are out of contact.
Far apart. Very, very true, and we want to thank you very much for those remarks. You rightly observe that the girl child has been affected more. So that draws me into our second question, Honorable Flavia. Now that the girl child seems to be more affected with the pandemic, what special stimulus package is in place to expedite recovery and remedial action? We've heard all that. The parents have not done well. Maybe government has not done as much as we could. But what is the future like?
Yes, we all have sinned and have fallen short
Of God's glory.
of the glory of these girls. So right from the household up to us, the government, we have all fallen short. The households, earlier, if I may take you again to the community girls actually were protected by skilling and teaching them how to work. So skilling keeps the girls busier than any other thing you can bring to them, including academic. So at home, because the skills set was lost, the tool set was lost, the girl is as idle as anybody who actually would be roaming around the towns. So I think I want to encourage parents, I want to encourage households and communities to go back to skilling these girls. Just teach them how to cook, teach them how to wash their clothes, teach them how to stitch, and that will keep them busy because most girls love hands-on things. Secondly, we have, of course, the community. The community must be mindful of the vulnerability and the delicate nature of girls in their communities so that they can take care and also do a neighborhood watch. Instead of telling the parents that I saw your girl moving around with boys and I expected that she would be pregnant, then you had better off not talk because you are coming late. And then when we come to government, we are policymakers. I want to tell you that the white paper on education has expired. This is the time for us to review. Is the education system we envisaged in the white paper still appropriate to the times? Don't you think that it is time for us now to embrace, for the urban places, online classroom, And for the rural setting, can we now embrace house or home schooling so that the parent can invite their teacher and pay that teacher and be able to keep these children, all of them girls and boys, busy so that none of them is left to simply, because I want to tell you the role of the teacher and the importance of the teacher in front of their class cannot be replaced by even technology.
Sure.
It cannot. And that is why they are tired of radios, they are tired of TVs, they want their teacher.
But did they even get the radios?
So all those are things that we need to talk about. So I want to advocate that we include homeschooling on our curriculum so that parents have more time with their children, and then the teacher comes to take away some of that time that these girls would fall into traps.
Yes, Honorable, as we plan to wind up,
and of course, a little thing.
Yes, please.
Even the education policy of 2008 is about to expire.
Sure.
So that gives us room now to start thinking of the skilling, because when you do home school, you have 2 hours of classroom, another 2 hours in the kitchen. We are now learning how to cook. I went to Mauritius to benchmark on that particular homeschooling, and I found a teacher who was teaching mathematics but from the garden.
Sure.
And children were holding their rulers
so well on time
to even measure one hole from another plant, and they were mathematics but very dirty with agriculture.
Yes,
and
Honorable, we hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
You seem to make very, very useful proposals for the continuity of education. How I wish you also had a small observation on what is in place now, because you've made a number of proposals of what we can do. But as Parliament, any stimulus package already existing, or you are still just in the kitchen?
I know that as Parliament, even earlier on, we had started on SAGE, social protection, and these cash grants to the older persons. Knowing that more than 4 million children are living with older persons, I know that this money that goes to the older persons would end up in their grandchildren and not necessarily them. And that was doing us a great deal because they would get their scholastic materials and whatever.
Okay.
And I loved the way the Prime Minister came up with a cash grant to the vulnerable households. I only don't understand why we have to use national IDs to identify vulnerable persons, after knowing that not every Ugandan has an ID, after knowing that most IDs actually had problems, their names were not correct, their age were not correct, and they need to be corrected, after knowing that even the children who registered for national IDs at their schools have never accessed them, knowing that the biggest
So it's really good that Honorable Flavia has a package of alternatives that we think could really
The alternative is to empower the household to take care of the social services in the home, so that this girl and the boy is not left destitute, and that we encourage that the households really take grips and hold their oars well, and then if the households can be empowered financially and physically.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I want
the
to
children
request
would
that
benefit.
we call it off at that, because
Please,
we are caught up by time. But I also want to assure you that your people of Chegegwa are following this conversation. When I checked the chat, I saw them chatting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I greet them. I have my slogan, Owawe Mali. Yes.
Thank you so much, Honorable. Online here, I really want to thank Ugandans following this conversation. The hashtag is education continuity. Just to sample a couple of the feedback, I see Ruhanga Frank says, with school closures, young girls continue to suffer violence at home, and parents need to spend more time with children such that they open up. Lane Mobiru, I see you here, you're saying that they need to improve the quality of life for children and also achieve a global and national goals. Thank you so much, Lynn. Katabani, that is Ayebare Solomon on Twitter. Nakureba Konka. Matia Nabawanda, I still see you here. You're saying girls were safer indeed in school than they were at home. Now, joining us in this conversation again, we have Honorable James Kwebeketeria, a member of the Education Committee in the Parliament of Uganda. Good morning, Honorable.
Good morning, sir.
I want to know, did I sound your name right?
Yes, you got 99%.
Well tried. The conversation is it's heated up here on Twitter and the other digital platforms. Honorable, you as someone who is on the Education Committee, what is Parliament doing to ensure that all the laws that it enacts and passes for education sector are known by the constituents and the wider public?
Thank you very much. Can I introduce myself?
Please.
Like my sister.
Please.
Rabahoro did. My name is Kube Keteria James.
Yes.
I represent the people of Bunya County East in Mayuge district. And like she said, I'm also returning in Parliament. I was there 10 years ago.
You're also returning.
Yes.
Welcome back.
And I used to I was the chair of the Social Services Committee,
Yeah.
which has now been separated into 3.
Nice.
It used to look after gender, the Ministry of Health, and Education. So I'm here in the capacity of member of the committee, but representing the chairperson who has some other engagements.
Indeed.
So nice being on NTV.
It's an honor to have you, Honorable.
You are most welcome. So in a way, you have asked me about laws.
Yes.
First of all, the Parliament, I think the 8th Parliament, made some good laws. First of all, it reviewed the Education Act of 1970. And that's how we ended up having the Education Act of 2008 plus BTVET Act of the same year. Now, in the laws, like you talked of reviewing those laws, one of them was actually to emphasize the UPE. There is a law that we said that UPE must be compulsory, and we should have some kind of punishment to a parent or a child who doesn't go to school. For a parent who refuses the child above 6 years to go to school should be fined not less than 20 currency points or serve 12 years in prison. But I think most Ugandans have outlooked that.
Honorable, I have a request online here. Someone says, I can't hear the Honorable for audibility. I request, it is safe here and we're distanced. You can take off your mask for purposes of clarity. We are dealing with a very pertinent issue here, children and education.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
So like I was saying, James Kubeketeria is my name, Bunya County East, Mayuge district. And I'm representing the chair of the Education Committee of the Parliament of Uganda. Yep. So briefly, I'd say that I've served in Parliament for 10 years. I've served there, and I've been on leave for 10 years. Yeah. So we made the Education Act of 2008 and the BTVET Act of 2008. I think by then I was the chairperson. And there are certain laws that we reviewed. And one of them was to ensure that UPE becomes compulsory. And in a way, if you don't take your child 6 years and above, if it is a parent, I think you are liable to imprisonment of not less than 12 months or a fine of 1 million shillings. Apparently. So that was one. And then 2, the BTVET Act of 2008 also emphasized that there is a need, like she was talking about reviewing, there is a need.
The white paper.
Yeah, for us to move from that white collar job training. So there is already the BTVET Act, which emphasizes that. Now, there's a policy called TVET policy. It talks about vocational. And that's why you find the skilling that has come up, which is likely to keep our children also focused. That other than thinking of getting white-collar jobs, there's no need of people overlooking certain professions. Because you've come here, I'm sure you have come in a vehicle, but when it gets a problem, you call a mechanic. Now, why do you underlook such whatever a profession? So in a way, you have talked about the review of the laws. Now, unfortunately, the Committee on Education of the 11th Parliament were only 2 weeks old. So we found when the budget had been passed by the 10th Parliament. And I think when the budget was ready, we never participated. So I know that when the midterm framework comes, maybe especially when it begins these other months of October and November, that's when the Committee on Education will look at which laws require to be reviewed. But back to our...
My critical issue here is how far has the Committee and Parliament popularized these laws to the wider public and the end users?
Well, at individual levels of individual members of parliament, it is upon ourselves to drum it up. But at the same time, like we made the Education Act of 2008, the entire ministries require, maybe through their public relations officers, to say this law has been put in place. I think that is okay. Let it be a joint effort to drum up that the law is in place, and there is need for Ugandans to take caution, such that the implementers of these laws take it. But there are so many good laws that we make, and because people are silent, one may not know.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that is the problem. Now, Honorable, how is the Parliament of Uganda doing to support the education sector in delivering its mandate? In this regard, let's focus on financing. Yes.
So in terms of financing, there is what we call the midterm framework paper. That when this paper is brought, the committee scrutinizes. We have a lot of technical persons that you look at item by item. And it is upon Parliament, in liaison with the ministry, that you make certain adjustments. I'm sure that when this is done, it can really solve a few gaps. The only problem, like I've told you, the committee is only 2 weeks. But I'm just very optimistic that when this paper comes, this committee has all able-bodied persons who can scrutinize these policies and make adjustments where possible. Because if I can pick from history, there was a time that we had teachers of second who had not accessed payroll from 1997. Now, a committee by then sat, scrutinized the budget, and there was some funds discovered within, where Parliament ordered the ministry to recruit 1,200 teachers, secondary teachers, to grant aid 33 schools out of that scrutiny. So I think Parliament does a very good job when it comes to the budgeting process. And whatever you hear in plenary, I would actually encourage honorable members that the emphasis should be put at committee level when it comes to budgeting. Because the figures speak louder than
the words.
The words. Yes.
Do you think some technocrats have not taken education to be a pertinent issue, the way they address it? Because we are having spillovers of challenges. The teachers, their remuneration, their motivation, and the effects spill over now to the children. What would you suggest needs to be done in that regard?
In terms of facilitating the teachers?
Facilitation and even trainings. I love the National Teachers Policy that was passed. It's very beautiful. But again, going back to your statements, you earlier alluded that the TVET program, if it's rolled out, many students are likely, you use the word likely, you know, to either switch or go with the education. Now I'm looking at the motivation of the teachers, plus the programming running, and how it spills over to the children, that we can have the children we are proud of.
So the issue of motivation is a national issue that I'm sure the entire government has to be in place or has to take part. I cannot begin blaming. In a way, it is a national issue and a prioritizing. If I remember very well that previously there was a battle between the donors in the education sector. That is in far back as far back as 2010-6, where the donors were giving us funds to construct classrooms. And by then Parliament was saying, how about the teacher who is earning 67,000? And we had a lot of discussions, especially in this very building here. And at the end of the day, I think the teacher, the primary teacher by then, moved from 67 consistently to about 200 some years ago. But now, I think they have now like doubled or tripled, which was okay. So when it comes to the issue of teachers and motivation, it is across the board. That if the teachers' salary is increased, automatically another civil servant will say, let it be increased. So that's why it must be a fully-fledged effort by the entire government. So a mere committee of Parliament cannot only look at catering for we, the teachers, vis-a-vis the other players in the
In the education sector. I totally agree. But now that you're in the committee, let's talk about the stimulus. Should we expect a stimulus for the teachers now that we are in the lockdown? They have hit a hard rock. We have run stories here where you shed a tear and you have to go down your pockets and you send down to these teachers. What is the committee planning about the teachers' stimulus?
First of all, when it comes to the teachers, beginning especially with the private sector, because there are no private students, they are all for the public.
True.
So the teachers that are in the private institutions have had it worse, especially in these COVID times.
Indeed.
And whatever interventions that the government has done, I think, given the processes and the delays, I think they have not benefited. So the committee, we actually are likely to emphasize that and ensuring that that one must be handled by reminding, because I'm sure government should have made a commitment on how to help the teachers that are in private schools to begin with. So, but I know where you are leading me to is to commit myself. I cannot commit myself.
I just wanted to know if the committee has this at heart.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Honorable. That is Honorable James Kubeketeria, a member of the Education Committee. We're still having the conversation. It's about education continuity. That's the hashtag on Twitter and on Facebook. And the conversation is still ongoing. A couple of you, I can see your tweets here. They're actually coming through. Biarahanga Frank says the children also begin to suffer additional stress that befalls families struggling, and all the conversation is still ongoing. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, the conversation is still ongoing. Good morning.
The rise in COVID-19 cases has led to the suspension of inter-district travel by both private and public transport means for 42 days. With Nation Courier Uganda, you still have the assurance that your package will reach its destination on time. We offer fast and affordable courier services countrywide and within East Africa to deliver all your special packages directly to your loved ones. Find us at Airtel House, Plot 40, Wampeo Avenue, or call 0200 711 302 or 0772 309 782. Nation Courier Uganda is a brand of Mulisa Publications Limited and is regulated by Uganda Communications Commission. Terms and conditions apply.
Equity Bank yabo jaye gulu sian bena yaba kaun kunu karma yaba kaun atim applying ci Equity Bank gumina loan me tractor ma twero nongo cham chalo nyagi no butia miari dokmalo.
At Equity Bank, we believe that when we work together, we grow. Equity Bank.
Daily Monitor ng'eriwo mu European Union delegation mu Uganda bakomerezaawo ebitundu 8 bijjudde essanyu n'ebisanyusa eby'akataba ka komedi akamanyiddwa nga Tessanduka. Ebitundu bino byonna bijjudde essanyu nga Tessanduka bali mu lugendo lwabwe okuva Jubani era omanyi biki bayitamu ebisanyusa n'ebyo bye baazuula bye batasobola kwerabira. Mulimu ebyokuyiga bingi n'ebyokuteebereza bingi era nga wandyetaaze nnyo kasoma tukkiriza mwana w'okuyitwako mukisa guno ogw'akataba kajjudde ebiyigiriza n'ebisanyusa. Weefunire kopi y'obuli lwakubiri okuva mu Rainbow Magazine.
Hey, now that's hitting the right notes. When life gets boring, we bring out our play. You see, playfulness is in our DNA. It's in the way we move and laugh. It's in the way we walk, the way we rock, and how we just don't stop. You feel me? We add color to everything, to every day and every dish, because the world needs our crazy. We're the different flavors that make life more exciting. We're the ones who add color to every moment. Fanta, color every moment.
It's still the education continuity conversation here on NTV, and we're live from Kampala Serena Conference Center. We have different stakeholders online joining this conversation. The hashtag is education continuing to be a part of this conversation. Earlier on, we had submissions from very pertinent members of parliament. Samakula takes up the next question because this was much more interactive. And I love the vibe online, by the way.
Thank you very much. And even when you get to the Q&A, there are a number of questions which we shall address. I can see Wamboya Mubarak, Martha Wabiro, and Martha Wabiro again. And the honorables are prepared to really tackle those concerns. Right about now, we want to invite Honorable Flavia Kalule Nabagabe, woman MP Kasanda. And Honorable Kabagabe, are you
Nabagabe
online? Nabagabe? Honorable Nabagabe? Oh, you are welcome to this dialogue and this conversation. Honorable, as you prepare to start us off, we know that you are one of the very, very serious activists around issues of children, around issues of child welfare, around issues of welfare of women, and so on and so forth. So I want you to bring all those insights in helping us to understand what legal and policy remedies do you suggest that Parliament should embark on to protect the girl child.
Honorable?
Hello, Honorable? Oh, the nation is eager to listen to you.
Yes, please.
Yes, Honorable, I just indicated that we are very much aware that we are very serious child activist, an activist for the welfare of women and rural communities. And when it comes to the girl child, that is where even you can put your hand. So we want to ask, Honorable, as you begin work in Parliament, what legal and policy remedies do you suggest that Parliament should embark on to better protect the girl child? You would begin by introducing yourself a little more in the first minute, then give your detail in the next 7 to 8 minutes, and later on you be reminded to wind up. And maybe to remind you, Honorable, that since this is a dialogue, we seem to be looking for more solutions than blaming each other. Thank you.
True. Thank you so much.
Honorable?
Oh, do I start?
Yes, please. A minute lost already.
Good morning. Good morning, viewers. My name is Flavia Kalule Nawagabe. I'm the woman member of parliament for Kasanda district, and also the chairperson of the Women League of the National Unity Platform. I am currently sitting on the Committee of Human Rights in Parliament and the Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development. I am a teacher by profession. I taught in Namilyango College for close to 6 years, and I also taught in Our Lady of Good Counsel, Gayaza, for quite some time. And so I am very honored to be part of this discussion that's discussing the future of our children in Uganda, but also how we see them through this lockdown, which is almost ending. Hopefully that it will not be reimposed, especially for education. Now, we all know that the right to education is a fundamental human right in Uganda, but everywhere in the world, globally. Every individual, irrespective of their age, gender, religion, their disability or political affiliation, has a right to, is entitled to education. And this is clearly stipulated in the Universal National Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And as Aristotle mentions, education is the best provision for the old age. So here we are today discussing the question on the future of the children, of our children in education. We know that COVID-19 has greatly affected the SDG 4, which is basically the transformative education and lifelong learning for all children, for everyone. And things are no longer at ease. We are in a crisis, but also I think this is a crisis that has provided a profound moment for the country to reform the system, our education system. And so I really hope that we will not waste this opportunity and be able to reform our system. It is very saddening to notice and to know that globally over 1.5 billion learners have been affected by this pandemic, but in Uganda here we have more than 15 million learners that have greatly been affected by the pandemic. Of course, from the closure of schools in March 2020 from the presidential directive up to now, schools, teachers, learners, parents, everyone is affected. We are all affected, and this is great. This is leaving so many people behind. Of course, there are a number of interventions that were brought up by the Ministry of Education and Sports in order to bridge some of these gaps, but there were glaring gaps, for example, of the increment, the skyrocketing teenage pregnancies that Honorable Flavia has highlighted, and I agree to Honorable Flavia, my chairperson of the Gender Committee. There was also, the media is always giving us statistics on how many people how many girls increasingly have become affected by the lockdown, especially in terms of teenage pregnancies. The recent update is the 1,400 girls in Luwero, but also in my district, Kasanda district, the previous lockdown, we saw that Kasanda was brought to the 10th position in Uganda among the districts that have been greatly affected by teenage pregnancies and school dropouts from schools currently being sold off in child marriages. Because one, they're also bored, they get bored by the education due to the elongated lockdown. But we have also seen that most of the parents are so happy and so quick to marry them off, because girls are growing, boys are growing, but girls grow faster than boys, incidentally. And so when some parents see that some girls have some boobs and something like that, they say, well, you should, you should get married off earlier. We have seen the increased gender-based violence. We have seen the increased inequality gaps in education that have come out largely because of this COVID. Before COVID, there was the inequality in learning, and we saw this in terms of the gap between the haves and the have-nots in the country was already there, because we have people who are in international schools. Their education system is still continuing because of the highly digitalized systems that they use. But now even the haves that don't have these digitalized best practices of learning have been affected greatly, because the distribution of radios that was supposed to be talked about, and then dissemination of material, education material in TVs in primary and secondary schools. Yes, it has helped a few, but it has mainly helped people who already have children of the people that can afford. In my largely rural-based area in Kasanda district, where you can hardly find a television set in a home. In fact, you find most of them zeroed in town centers, trading centers only, and that's where everyone converges to watch the evening news. Mainly, most people use radios, but how many parents are willing to offer their radios to children to study for a whole day? Most of these radios are owned by men, and most of these radios are always moved around. The men always move around with the radios. So very rare times will you find that a parent will sacrifice their radio for students to learn. But also we know that the dissemination exercise for materials, printed materials, was supposed to have done by the RDCs and the CAOs, the chief administrative officers. But I mean, in parishes and sub-counties, I know of so many parishes in my home area that haven't gotten these materials, and so children have been left out largely in this lockdown because they are engaged in gold mining, in stone quarrying, in home cores and all. Yes,
Hello,
please.
Honorable Nabagabe.
Yes,
we like
yes,
all the ideas you are really putting forward, and we appreciate the challenges. But our time is fast running, and I would like to really redirect you to focus more on the remedies that you propose as a new and fresh mind in this parliament. How best can we now handle the issues of the girl child and any other children as we get out of the pandemic and get back to school? And that will be in the next 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I think the way forward for this country is, one, to create, to strengthen political and policy leadership in our education sector so that we bridge the inequality and quality education gaps that we have in a country. I think this can be largely by how we as parliamentarians and how as the executive, we can forge way forwards, especially in terms of lawmaking. I have seen that, to curb down the child abuse and the child marriages that have largely affected the girl child in this epidemic. I think this is the time to call to bring forward and revamp our Domestic Violence Act 2010. We have to look at the Sexual Offences Bill critically. I hope the President can bring it forward to Parliament so that it can be passed immediate, so that it can, I hope the President can
Honorable
send to it so that it
Nabagabe,
can start implementing it.
Honorable Nabagabe,
Yes,
we want to thank you so much. Time is not on our side, but this is a conversation that is still ongoing. We can continue hearing from you.
Two final ones. I think it's time we looked at more at the digitalizing of the education for future purposes, so that in times when we have another pandemic, we don't leave anyone behind. So I think there is no other future. Now is our critical time, and our future is now. We need to seriously focus on safeguarding the security of education of our children. Thank you very much.
Doing well on time. Online, there could be questions coming your side shortly. I want to get back to Andrew so that he helps us wind up.
Before you go, I really want to thank you for the context you've actually shared here. And before we're done with this conversation today, I would really love to tap into a little more about the down approaches that can be mitigated or used from the rural setting level before we come to the national level. I will tap in that a little later. Okay. Thank you, Honorable. That is a very good conversation. We're still ongoing with the conversation, education continuity. It's a conversation ongoing now. Joining us, we have Dr. Hamisi Mugendawala, and happens to be the Education Lead National Planning Authority. And that is the conversation we are having. But before that comes through, we want to understand how you perceive this entire conversation. Wherever you're coming from, I want you to give us the hashtag. It's education continuity. Be a part of this conversation. Dr. Hamisi, are you with us? Dr.
Yes,
Hamisi? A very good morning, Doctor. Now, with the challenges posed by COVID-19 and the ongoing remote learning, can distance learning or online kind of learning be the best solution for this, for starters? While you're introducing yourself.
My name is Hamisi Mugendawala, and I work for National Planning Authority. I am an education economist. To get back to your question, honestly, there are quite various limitations on whichever choice that you make to continue learning. And as you know, government had taken a multi-pronged approach that
we have up to
various segments of the population. And as you know, we had thought that the print materials, radio classes, TV classes, and the internet learning would go a long way in supporting the continuity of learning. But then we noticed that whereas the remedial interventions had been designed for the majority, they actually have ended up serving the minority. And this is mainly a big challenge within the developing world due to the structural rigidities which are so peculiar to the developing countries. Within Uganda, you realize that the different modes of schooling and the different remedies that we had chosen were so much hampered by the fact that a lot of households do not have access to electricity. We are talking about 72%, and majority of them being in the rural areas. We are looking at a population, which majority do not have smartphones that support learning processes, and very few people having access to the internet. And so the effect of this means that so many children, about 70%, are left out of the schooling process. Now, I must say that this is a significant challenge to all the developing world because of those peculiar issues. The point that I want to make here, or the bottom line that has also been hinted on by the Honorable Member of Parliament, I think from
Doctor, can you hear me?
Chegegwa, there is no
Doctor, can you hear me?
to the physical school, especially in the developing countries.
Doctor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, after your first submission, then I have a very pertinent question. Is the education in Uganda designed for the majority or the minority?
Honestly, the education in Uganda is designed for the majority, although sometimes the structural rigidities tend to favor a minority affluent families.
Nice.
Just right from our laws, you'll see that the Constitution makes it a right for every Ugandan who is of school age to enjoy their right to education. The challenge is that when COVID hit, we closed the schools and we had not built the cooperant systems that would enable off-school learning. But I think this is a wake-up call, and as National Planning Authority, we have already embarked on working with different stakeholders, including a company called Sensor Systems Limited, to design off and online learning systems that would support children located in different areas, whether they have access to internet or not. But all these will be in the long run. Currently, our focus should be on working around the clock to see that schools open as fast as possible, because whichever solution we bring about will exclude a significant number of children. That is for sure.
Okay. Then with the prevailing low completion rate of the high dropout rate in the country, characterized by the education institutions, not only that, in what the NPA is a post-COVID recovery plan for the education, we need to know, how do we recover from the dropout rate of the children?
Yeah, I must say that by the time COVID hit us, our education system was actually on a recovery path. From the key indicators, we had started doing so well on access. And as you know, the president put up directives that every parish must have a primary school. And as we talk now, 92% of all parishes in Uganda have a government school, primary school. And as well, 72% of all sub-counties in the country have a government secondary school. And so you realize that even enrollment rates had really gone high. The sticker issues that we were still dealing with are the survival rates, because we have one of the highest, one of the lowest survival rate, which is currently 41%, a slight improvement from the 37% compared to Kenya's 93% and Tanzania. Now, when we did some rapid assessment of the effect of COVID before coming up with a COVID recovery plan, we realized that about 65% of the private primary and secondary schools are facing financial distress and at the risk of closure. And we also realized that 80% of higher education private institutions have already expressed financial distress to their staff, meaning that most of the staff in private universities might lose their jobs or have suspended their contracts. And we also realized that 64% of the parents will struggle to or fail to pay fees, and this will worsen our non-enrollment and the dropout. Now, in light of this, as National Planning Authority, our first strategy that we have recommended to the sector is to protect schools and training institutions from closure, because this is going to raise non-enrollment and dropout. And some of the key inputs or actions to achieve or to protect schools and training institutions from closure, we are saying that there is need for an emergency grant or support fund that is supposed to support distressed schools and training institutions to retain and pay staff. But as well, we are saying that there is need for the sector to increase the budget for instruction materials, particularly in public schools, given that SOPs bring in a lot of need for instruction materials, because children have to sit spaced, meaning that they cannot share books. Then we are suggesting that there is need to grant reasonable statutory payment holiday to particularly private schools and training institutions, so as to enable them mobilize tuition funds to pay staff and procure learning materials. But we are as well saying that the education budget, just like Honorable Bacteria indicated, should be ring-fenced from any cuts, because the system has been hit hard. And we are saying that there is need for government to support training institutions to restructure their financial obligations with financial institutions, because we know that a lot of schools are indented, and given that they've lost revenue, they are finding it difficult to pay back the loans. Now, our second strategy is that we need to protect vulnerable groups of children, particularly girls, the poor, and those learners who are in the rural areas, to stay, to return and stay in school. Because we realized that more than 30% of learners, both in primary and secondary, might not return even when we open up schools. And so there is need, deliberate need or move to protect them and ensure that they return. And some of the key actions that we are asking the stakeholders to take in the COVID recovery is that now that we have the parish development model, we need to leverage it to design and implement a parish level outreach strategy for engaging families that have learners that are at high risk of dropping out of school. We are saying that the parish chief should lead this. We are saying that the parish development committees should lead in this, where they should identify these families with the children who are most likely not to return to school and engage them and support their return. But we are also saying that all actors and the sector should engage in re-enrollment campaigns, especially in marginalized communities, to minimize school dropout. You realize that our rapid assessment indicated that so many families have forgotten about school, even the children. This means that even when schools begin, there are quite a number of families that will not be aware. And there are those that as well will deliberately not re-enroll children back in school. So we will need a re-enrollment campaign, particularly in the marginalized communities. And we in our plan, we are appealing to all key stakeholders not to make children repeat at whichever level. We know the challenges that will come out of this. It will clog the system, which is already overstretched. Let children be automatically promoted. And then, as National Planning Authority, we are going to support the sector to prioritize learning recovery And we are suggesting that we will need to suspend routine tests. We will need to suspend intermediate assessments, and we will need to adjust the term and the semester holidays accordingly to recover learning. But as I've told you, we will need to ring fence the education budget from cuts. Our third strategy is on supporting livelihoods for parents to enable them pay fees. As I've told you from our assessment, 64% of the parents are going to struggle to pay fees. And some of them will be forced to withdraw children from fees paying schools. So we are saying that as a COVID response plan for the education sector, we will need to provide a reasonable grace period within which parents can pay tuition and enforce the existing fees regulations. We need to put cappings beyond which schools should not increase fees, because everyone is indeed hurt and struggling. We are also saying that if the worst comes to the worst, we may need to encourage economically struggling households who may fail to cope with private education tuition to enroll their children in the nearby public schools in the neighborhood. And finally, and most importantly, we need to immunize our education system against subsequent flare-ups of pandemics. And what we are saying is that in the National Development Plan, we are saying that the country can achieve the demographic dividend if we kept every Ugandan in school for 11 years. That means from P1 to senior 4. That our models show that that's when we can dream of the demographic dividend. Now, this means that we must equip, in the long run, every school with the basic minimum requirements that will allow children enroll and stay and learn and transition. That is key. Children must have a roof over their heads. They should have where to sit. They should have where to write. They should have scholastic materials, and they should have a teacher in front of them. And the second action on the aimed at immunizing the education system is on leveraging the ICT in teaching, learning, management, and monitoring. And I've told you that National Planning Authority is working together with sensor systems to work on a system that works on and offline. And
finally, Dr. Hamisi.
Quite cost effective. Second last, we are looking at... hello?
In a minute, second last?
Yes. So we are saying that we should look beyond just having the school as the provider of education, and we have started looking at options for the village-based or home-based learning communities, and this investigation has kicked off at the National Planning Authority, and we will be reporting back to you. Lastly, we are saying that to immunize our education system against the various flare-ups, there is a gold mine that we are not focusing on. That is preschool. We've realized from our research that children who have attended preschool, the positive effects of preschools tend to immunize them and help them stay in school even when they join poor primary schools. Those are some of the critical strategies that National Planning Authority is looking at post-COVID.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hamisi. Please hang in there. This conversation is going up to noon today, and there are a couple of questions online and in the chat and in the gallery. We'll tap a little into that. But now, going back to Honorable Charles Ayume, I understand your network is getting a little bit getty. Honorable Charles Ayume, I want to get back to you now that you've been in the field during COVID-19 and your team. What is your experience in the field during the monitoring evaluation you're doing in the field? Honorable Ayume? Honorable Charles, kindly unmute your mic.
Thank you very much, David. I will keep my narrative, Andrew, sorry, to education.
Yep.
We were very worried in regard to the teenage pregnancies we're seeing. And in Yumbe district, in one of the district task force meetings, during one of the submissions by the RDC, one border rider had impregnated 13 teenage girls, and that was very worrying, very alarming actually, and he disappeared into thin air. Now, of course, as a medical doctor, we work closely with the education sector and so many other things. One of the things I've seen right from my grassroots practice was the issue of cases of rape and cases of defilement. And justice is not being delivered because there's a mismatch between the legal system and the healthcare system. If you ask somebody who has been raped or defiled, the first thing is, I have to go to the police. And yet the entry point should be the health sector, because the evidence that's going to be used in court has to be gotten within the first 72 hours. That's where you do the vaginal swabs, the examination, and the epithelial tissue of that area heals very fast. If you do not examine it within 72 hours, you'll fail to get the necessary evidence that's admissible in court. Other than the evidence, we're also looking at the clinical aspect. You have to prevent that pregnancy, and it's all within the 72 hours. The infections, the post-exposure prophylaxis. So the education sector has to come out strong. We synergize together with the health sector, the judiciary, to ensure that we prevent such things. But also, most importantly, the narrative has to change. What we are preaching to these adolescents in adolescent reproductive health, instead of saying prevent early sexual intercourse and all that, we have been doing that for so many years. I think one of the things we need to add is, in case you've been defiled or you've had unprotected sex, where can you go and get the morning after pill? We should make it very available. It should be an over-the-counter drug. It should be in every health facility. Because if you take a random example and ask women below 30 years old that after unprotected sex, what's the next step? They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know all these cycles. So the education sector, my colleague Honorable Flavia, please struggle. We are ready to work with you, but put these components of health education in adolescent reproductive health. Now, back to my colleague from National Planning Authority. These ideas are very good, but I think the approach, right now it's the health sector in the limelight. But I would also think the education sector has to be in the limelight, because trying to bring the education sector post-COVID to par is a Herculean task. I foresee two types of generations post-COVID. One that is lagging behind because they do not have access to computers, to internet, and then another generation that has access to education online. And you can say, I think one school recently was in the media having got 110 phones. Now, where I come from, we need to be looking at, has the education sector mapped out most at-risk areas that we envisage that post-COVID, it's going to be a struggle for them to get back to the same line, to the same level with the rest of the education system. These are hard to reach areas. Areas, even before COVID, they were still performing poorly. The island districts, the mountainous areas, even where I come from, we did not do well in the last primary living examination. So I think we need to have a multi-sectoral approach. The boardroom projections are very good. But let's look out what's happening on the ground. The whole of northern Uganda, we're still having power outages. These are some of the things affecting the health sector. Some of these are affecting the education sector. Children can't read at night because of power outages. So as we try and clean up, let us look at
recording stopped.
Finally, again, I'll throw this to the education sector, and if Ministry of Public Service is listening.
Recording in progress.
We need critical staff to run our ICUs, and they are not there. Is there a way in which we can say an anesthetic officer who is in third year, an anesthesiologist who is in his third year, just waiting to write his thesis and graduate, can we temporarily employ those into the beautiful ICUs that Ministry of Health is trying to put in the regional referral hospitals? Because ICUs can't run with beds, with oxygen concentrators, without the human resource. So that is something we need to look at. If the policy can be tweaked a bit, we can deploy these people, and we can have these ICUs up and running.
So much, Honorable Charles Sayume.
Should we freeze the education sector and say everybody this year is in P7, is in S2, until government has gotten the money to vaccinate all eligible people, and then we can open up and education starts running as usual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Honorable Charles Sayume. I think he has a very pertinent issue. I love when he calls for inclusion of the young generation in the critical sectors. People in the ICT must be our generation that understand the dynamics here and there, who are tech, exposed and the likes.
I also like it when he says the narrative should change. Gone are the times when we have to stick to those conservative models.
Yeah.
I think it's high time all people from the different sectors join their heads.
Yes.
And now that he also talks of participation of children, may we invite a child in this program to give us a poem around the subject of discussion. Many times we say we are planning for children, but we don't involve them. We want them to come on. So our dear child, could we get you to deliver that wonderful poem?
We are preparing the child, and as soon she's, she just needs to be strong a little bit. She's a little bit scared. But let me just stop a little, while they're preparing her, let's stop a little bit from the feedback online. I'm sure you have messages in the gallery there, and questions that are coming through. On Twitter, if I go on Twitter, Njuba1, it says that we have been conducting community reading days with communities so as to encourage children to continue reading and learning amidst the continued school closures. We can work together to have some in your district. They're saying this goes to Honorable Flavia Kalude. And Frank Biarohanga says, I love the submission on the digitalization to migrate the education loss caused by school closures, but the poorest children in rural areas are least likely to live in good home learning environments with internet connections. We'll need to get a feedback from that from Honorable James. Then this one says that even before the pandemic, Uganda was not prioritizing SRH, sex education in school. Home taboo around sexual health talk has left teenagers with no options for reliance since the sex education curriculum is non-existent. The issue of contraceptives keeps coming back.
Yes.
And I know that one of the panelists that is coming soon will actually have to help us address that.
Yes.
Because shortly we shall be having one Dr. Mugahi, who is very passionate in that field.
About contraceptive. What is in the gallery?
Yes, when we check the gallery very fast, I see Mr. Nabendra in the chat. In the chat, first of all, indicating that Dr. Hamis, he wanted Dr. Hamis to explain the fear of increasing fees. This is exactly what he says. The Right Honourable President has criticized charging of fees in UPE schools. National Planning Authority evaluation of UPE recommended the increase of UPE per capita grant to Uganda shilling 60,000. So the question is, will next year's budget reflect this increase? Mr. Mgendawala should prepare for that. And when I quickly check the Q&A, I see Mubarak Wamboya asking, particularly Honorable Flavio over here, how will our children return to school when plans of controlling COVID measures in schools are not properly explained to the parents? I think that is a very critical question. And then Martha Abiro is wondering, is requesting Honorable to comment, Honorable Flavio again, to comment on family planning services for teenagers. Then the same Martha comes again to ask about the review of the Domestic Violence Act. And Benedict Lokiru is asking Dr. Hamisi, what are you saying, immunization? Dr. Hamisi, what you are saying, immunizing education system appears academic and ideal aspirations for Ugandans. But the question is, how are you linking with the Ministry of Finance and that of Education to see through the increased budget allocations to achieve that? I was thinking all along our child was getting ready, but in case he's not, we could then ask.
Ready.
She's ready now.
Yes,
okay, let's have the child.
Hello, beautiful. Carry on. Yes, you are live. You can give us your poem.
Oh, but maybe she begins by telling us who she is and then proceeds with the poem.
Yeah, tell us your name and then you give us the poem.
I'm Tumsime Alice from Pacha Model Primary School. Area, young area, going to recite a poem entitled
Come on, network, come on, come
Corona.
on.
COVID-19 hands are so peaceful, dreaming that he hasn't done anything harmful. Nature is the only gift of God. Admit that he made that gift as a sword. There came from the east a terrible disease, where everyone is unaware of its beast. Everyone knows it is terrible, but no one knows to be careful. Large number of people are suffering a lot. Tiny and mighty nations are suffering a lot. COVID-19, COVID-19, COVID-19. Oh, cry the best you can cry. I can feel the hold as it holds. You put our health at risk and our education was halted by you. We no longer go to school. Both children and teachers are not safe. We cannot attend our lessons with our teachers' support. Playing with our friends is no more. School-going girls have been married off with some glued in child labor. The rights of children have been abused and neglected. We want to be in a learning environment, but cannot afford to. With children's hope for education continuity not clear. We wish you no successes every day, claiming lives across nation. You have become a thorn in our flesh. Our fears keep us awake at night, putting us in a state of total confusion, not knowing what is going to happen next. COVID-19, COVID-19, COVID-19. Doctors, take risks to keep us safe. We are here to support each other. Government, take the responsibility in education. As it says, when you rest, you rust. Give us all it takes to study at home. Access to learning materials. Parents supporting us. So stay safe by adhering to the precautions. Each day will pass. We will work together in love. No matter what comes our way, we will not compromise our faith to see a glowing nation without COVID-19. For God and my country.
Somebody would say, what a wow.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much to Musime Alice. What a wow. We are very gratified that you're part of this conversation, that it has denied them the right to education, the right to interact with their teachers. I feel so proud of her.
Sure. And from her face, you'd see the anxiety, the panic all our children are going through because of the uncertainty of the future. We love your children, and this panel is actually meant to discuss how we move forward as we slowly ease down the lockdown and plan to get back to school. So about now, I think we need to get back to
the honorables need to respond to a lot of questions.
Yes, and maybe only to indicate to them that time is also not much on our side.
Oh, yes, indeed.
We highlighted the questions that came by. Maybe we can now request Honorable Flavia to start it off.
I want to thank everyone who has participated in this conversation. And I want to tell you this is a conversation that should never stop. When you talk about children, you are basically talking about us. And therefore, no one of us would stop talking about children because it is what we are. And I want to emphasize the idea of going back to the roots. The traditional and community methods of bringing up children, it was collective. And not like it is now that every house has their boundaries. I think maybe we may even rethink about the gates and the boundaries we put around our households, because they create a barrier for us to know what happens inside the household, and even then the interaction with the community, so that the community can collectively work together to ensure that all our children are safe. It is everybody's right to protect the children. And I want to commend and sincerely thank the Queen of Uganda for the girl-child retreats that she has come up with. I mean, she just, I think, made an analysis and found out that she needed to put a brick to ensure that the girls are protected there during holidays, when all the parents would go to work and leave these children to housemaids and also communities. She came up with the girls' retreats. And I want to really say that if these could be scaled up, maybe we would make our children better used than what it is now. And so I want to commend that so much. And how do children return to school when schools are not ready after COVID, and even when the parents are not informed? We who are proprietors of schools, I am a proprietor of a primary school, private, we have all our ears and our eyes up to government. We see a lot on social media, like indicators that there will be opening, that there will be this. Of course, some is false, but for us, we are all eyes and ears there to make sure that we get that information. And what we do, even in the previous, we would call the parents to indicate to them that the school will be opening at this point, so prepare that child to come back to school. So let us, all of us, take it upon ourselves to disseminate this information. And of course, community leaders, local leaders, politicians, let us take it upon ourselves to keep these people informed. On radios, it is good that this country now scaled up the private radios, so the local radios can do a lot for us to make sure that the parents are kept with appropriate information on the beginning of schools. And of course, like Dr. Mugendawala said, we need to hybridize. It is high time. We hybridized our education so that there is a phase of a one-on-one with teachers. There is a phase, go back home, now we shall be online. There is a phase, now come, we shall be here 3 weeks, go back home. It is high time we hybridized, because we may not be at school for all the 3 months or all the 6 months of a semester, but I think it is high time we started adopting and appreciating hybridizing, so that we can assess the spaces where education happens, whether schools or homes or whether online, and make sure that we put somehow some interfaces so that the anxiety is controlled.
Thank you very much,
family
Honorable.
planning for teenagers, I think Dr. Mugahi, I want him to tackle that. But I think I want to borrow the idea. I think there are things we have said enough. To stop the girls, don't meet men, don't meet boys. I am a teacher of secondary school. But there's a time when I was teaching people's wives. And it is the man who drops his wife in class. So I couldn't continue to say stop men when I have people's wives in the class. So there are things we shall just have to get away from.
Actually, we need a more detailed conversation around that.
If we have to continue to have them.
So I want to thank Honorable Flavia so much. Incidentally, when I called Flavia, the other Flavia had also responded. I'm extremely sorry because there are two. But right now, Honorable Kalule, you are on, Flavia. Sure. Yes, take on. And
thank you very much. And I want to respond to the question of the sexuality education, sexual reproductive health rights that was mentioned, I think, here. First of all, as a country, we cannot continue hiding our heads in the sand because we are all aware that sex is happening in the schools, and our children as young as the ages of 8, 10 are engaging in sex, which is extremely sad and disheartening as a country. But I think we need to repackage as Parliament. We need to restart the conversation on sexuality in sexuality education in schools. There's a time that conversation had come to the surface and then it died out, it phased out because it got a lot of backlash from the religious community, some communities, people who know the fact that sex is happening, but we cannot openly discuss it. We cannot openly guide our children on how to keep themselves safe and how not to engage in certain activities. But even when they decide to engage, how safe are they in schools? Because we all know that we send our children in schools to learn, but in this learning they learn so many other things including sex. So how do we protect our children from some of these acts? We need to have clearly streamlined mechanisms and policies that are going to help our children stay in school. But of course, besides out of school and for teenage mothers that are happening all over the country, then how do we safeguard their right to having the health system that they deserve? Can we promote youth-friendly services across the country in our health facilities so that these young people that find themselves in such instances are not shy about getting reproductive health services in the health centers? But also, can we have these health corners in all our health centers so that they can clearly cater to young people who are engaging in such activities? But otherwise, I think the continuous sensitization of our communities, the career guidance to our students to enable them know that there are role models that have actually come out of schools without getting pregnant, that have completed their education without rushing to marriages, that have also been able to attain all their goals and dreams without having to look at all these distractions that come up when one is still in school and is still feeling like they are so young and they cannot be held accountable for choices that they make. I think that is also important to have this conversation rolling. And one last thing I wanted to talk about is how do we build the future for our children? We need, I think, to engage in building infrastructure that can help the future of our children. For example, can we have accessibility to computer labs? And this is mainly a planning question. Can we plan to have computer labs? Can we plan to code? Can we plan to digitalize? Can we plan to have an all-focusing education, an encompassing education that can help everyone, regardless of whether they are rural-based or whether they are in urban areas? I think that's important for us to have that conversation. And lastly, as members of Parliament and as the executive, I think it's important that we plan gender-responsive activities that are going to engage all our children, but also engage teachers, engage parents at the same time, because the lack of sensitization around education is still also huge. The education gap is largely as a result of mindset change. So if we can have constant conversations such as these around education, its importance, its use, its goals, but also how, especially focusing on some of the girl children that are largely left behind, I think it can also contribute greatly to bridging the gaps on education, and especially child marriages and sexual reproductive health rights, but also while helping us as a country to move this agenda forward, because an educated child is definitely a huge development to a country.
Thank you so much, Honorable Flavia Kalule. It's still a conversation we're having. Honorable James, there were some questions earlier that were sent directly to you. Do you mind responding to them?
Just for purposes of, because what I saw was some proposal that we should do the digitalization of education.
Yep.
And maybe use of TVs. But I would like to tell the listeners and those ones watching, that the viewers, that according to research, in as far as TV coverage in the whole country is concerned, in Uganda, 1%.
You can imagine.
Of TV. So in a way, me as a rural person, I think we should emphasize the print materials. That these print materials should be basically taken to the rural areas. Because this 1% in urban zone, in urban areas, I think when you follow that, it may not really be very, very effective. Now, at the end of it all, generally, because very few questions have been raised to me, in as far as we are concerned as Ugandans, the best thing we can do is let's emphasize the immunization of all our citizens. And the schools, I think, are the best places that we can use these schools, that we immunize the children. Because all the funds now must be toward this immunization of these children, that they will be now free to go and study without any fear, because they will have taken all the doses of immunization. And I think it's very okay in a way. Either if the policy is for them to return in phases like they have been, it becomes easier. Not even congestion will be in a school, say a secondary school. We can say senior one is reporting on such a time for immunization. And so are the primary schools. For those ones who are above, of course in the primary schools you may get people who are 18 years.
Teachers, people's wives.
So the immunization should be taken seriously, top on the agenda. And when it comes to all resources, immunization is the answer. That when budgets are cut, should we do that, we are going to be very, very sure of where we are going. Now, I've heard my colleagues talk about the girl child. How about the boy child? I think this is to the males. That as long as the women are talking about the girl child,
we should amplify the drama as well.
And telling them the precautions. They are only cautioning the girl child, but the boy child will turn out to be very wild. So let's also address the boy. In fact, the girl child is now doing well. In the schools in rural areas, there are more girls than boys, simply because the ladies have taken it upon themselves to caution the girls, not knowing they are going to stay with the boys. So it is something that the men and the women at the same time should begin another battle of girl versus the boy child. Because the emphasis is done, but you're only training one person who will eventually...
The other will become a luggage.
So there's need for us also to look at the boy child in its entirety. I think basically those are the ones that I had when it comes to this conversation. The other one is about discipline. I said discipline is manufactured at home. And as long as the society is indisciplined, but the discipline begins at home.
True.
So now, the clan leaders should take it upon themselves to go back to the roots. So our traditional leaders, that could be one of their major roles. Minister of Gender and Social Development should actually prevail over these clan leaders, that they should have frequent clan meetings. At the personal level, I've tried it and there is some positivity.
Oh, yes. That's nice. Yes.
There's some positivity that when you continuously talk about an ill, and at the end of the day, my son may not be listening to me, but he could be listening to my brother. That during that meeting, this boy is just going to be put to order.
Nice.
So something must be double-pronged, and we are likely to have a good society. Because whatever you see in the roads, in offices, in manufactured at home,
comes from home.
Of discipline.
Thank you so much, Honorable Henry. I think the Honorables have responded to this.
Sure.
Hamisi will respond a little later.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really want to thank the Honorables so much. I can see that they already have the vigor to highlight these issues as they get back to Parliament.
Oh, yes.
And we're only looking forward to further engage them on the same questions. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable James indicates that the boys also need to be catered for. And we know that however much we prepare the girls, they likely end up into a relationship and into a marriage. But it's very sad for an empowered man to get married to a very empowered woman. So we need to be mindful of that. If you went out to look for who is more dirty out there, it is the boy. Who is programless, who wants to move all over the village, it is the boy, and so on and so forth. But to bring this discussion towards the last moments, we now want to invite more people from the government of Uganda. I want to request Dr. Mugahi to get set. Dr. Mugahi is the Assistant Commissioner in charge of reproductive and child health at the Ministry of Education and Sports. Doctor, I know you're online and you've already heard from the discussions a lot of pointers to you as far as family planning is concerned, sexual reproductive health information for the young ones, and so on and so forth. So may I request you to talk to us? And as you talk to us, I want to request you to begin by a brief introduction. I know you more at the Ministry of Health, but I also hear you're a very big officer in the government of Toro. So you may want to tell us a little more about that, but then get to the subject matter in the next 8 minutes, and then I'll alert you on how to summarize. So could you introduce yourself before I give you the highlights of the questions? Dr. Mugahi? As
Dr.
Yes,
Mugahi,
yes.
Unmute your mic.
He has unmuted, and we also wish to see you.
Yes. Dr. Mugahi?
Dr. Mugahi is on, and he indicates that he's in the car. I don't know how but he's prepared to tell us what he wants to tell us.
He's changing his video. Flip it like that.
Thank you so much, moderator. And I've been following Henry. The discussion is really very rich.
But quickly, first introduce yourself, then we'll get to my critical questions, Doctor.
Yes. Henry, my name is Dr. Richard Mugahi. I'm the Assistant Commissioner in charge of reproductive and child health at the Ministry of Health. I also work as a cultural minister in Toro Kingdom, and I've been very clear because of our joining piece of SRS, sexual and reproductive health. We've supported so many adolescent health reforms, and I clearly understand the background of the discussion in terms of teenage pregnancies. Me and you, Henry, have been at the forefront of pushing for the school health policy, the adolescent health policy, the sexual and reproductive health rights policy, which we still have some way to complete with our political leadership. So as a matter of introduction, I think that is quite what I can say, and I'm happy to be on this platform this morning.
Gritty. So my first question to you, Doctor, what interventions has the Ministry of Health put in place to ensure improved reporting on COVID-19 cases in schools without fear of disclosure? Doctor, you recall that when the second lockdown came, a number of children came back home when they were challenged, and it seems like they actually ensured that they supplied whatever disease they came with. So the question now, how as the Ministry of Health have you prepared to improve reporting? We heard that schools had kept quiet about the cases. When the cases went home, things became worse. So could you give us some highlights over the ministry's plan on that? Focus on disclosure and the fear.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you so much, Henry. Of course, there's a lot that is being done. I want to begin with that as a preamble. There's a lot that is being done, and we are not able to share it on this meeting. But what I can say is that there is going to be increased presence of Ministry of Health getting involved, working together with Ministry of Education at the service delivery points, which are the school level. Ministry of Health has the infrastructure. We are ready. We have reactivated our infrastructure at the subnational level. We have the district health teams, which are well constituted. And we also have extension workers who are going to work with the education structures at district level to ensure that districts are being, schools are being monitored for compliance to SOPs. I want to remind us that there was an issue on compliance to SOPs that led to schools being foci of infection. What you said is actually correct. Children were infected at school and they were sent home. That is very correct. And what we want to do now is to ensure that there is a strict adherence to SOPs. I'm happy the education sector is very compliant about this. The head teachers are compliant, the school directors are compliant. Number two is to ensure also that there is a school-based surveillance system, health surveillance system. This is something we didn't have before, but we've clearly worked out to get routine, daily information about how the schools are functioning in terms of health, what kind of illnesses are coming out. So we've had a routine surveillance system. This is not new to us in the Ministry of Health. So we want to extend it, and the framework has already been completed of how it's going to work with the schools. All we need is a compliance system from education to ensure that we are able to deliver as we pledged. We are also equally concerned about as children being at home. There are other issues that are developing out of school, of their continued stay at home. Issues around VAC. Someone clearly talked about violence against children. A lot of violence is happening. They are also mentally challenged. They are getting mental issues. They are anxious. They have a lot of fears. They have a lot of unanswered questions in their heads. So all these will be screened in the schools, and we want them to be put at a minimum pressure, not too much pressure of pumping them, because some of them might actually break down. Because of the time they've spent at home, they are likely to go back into the schooling mode gradually and peak at some point. So I think this is very critical. We have, as someone mentioned, some may not return because of teenage pregnancies. Our healthcare system will support those ones. And I think education gave a guidance on what to do with a pregnant student or pupil. There is a clear guidance on that. We have a couple of that. So these are issues that we need to really focus. We really face as a country, and they all need.
Yes, Dr. Mgahi. We've been hearing you loud and clear, and we really love all the proposals that Minister of Health is putting forward. As a member of the education sector myself, I actually promise to continue requesting my bosses to work with you as Minister of Health, because this is a multi-sectoral thing. A lot of medical challenges are going to come up. Dr. rightly mentions the issue of stigma itself.
True.
I've previously seen young girls returning to school when they seem to be fatter than the teachers, taller than the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
I saw a young boy who had a bigger beard than the teachers, and all those are causing stigma and finally ending up into causing some emotional violence.
Yeah.
Doctor, I'm still with you, and now I want to engage you on my second question. At what level in terms of percentages and figures are we at as a country in terms of immunization of teachers? Because as we prepare, we don't know whether we are getting back to school soon, whether we are getting back in a lump sum or not, but the critical team to really, that must be safe, is that of the teachers who handle our children on a day-to-day basis. Doctor?
Thank you, Henry, again. And I just tried to your question on vaccination. At the beginning of this lockdown, we envisaged that if we could vaccinate enough, then it would be extremely safe to say that we now reopen, we allow economic activities to go on. But the lockdown is ending soon, and we've not been able to do that. That is one of our biggest regrets, but it was not within our making. You all understand the issues around the supply chain for vaccines globally, and I'm receiving some good news that we are shipping some vaccines from China. I've just received the good news. And this means that teachers being part of our critical group, or the group that we are targeting, they are going to receive first priority. As we talk now, the vaccination percentages for teachers are still low. I have figures amounting to, we've only vaccinated 152,000 out of a targeted 550,000 teachers. That's close to 28%, and those have only received one jab. So we think there's a lot we still have to do, but I think there are serious debates on whether this should be a hindrance. But we think that if the schools cannot comply to the SOPs, we can have vaccinations can come in, and we have the process going on. About the compliance of teachers, I think it's going to be a directive. I had the speech from His Excellency the President. It was very clear. For teachers to be allowed back to school, they must be fully vaccinated. And I think this is going to be a very serious directive. But it has helped other countries, and I think this is what is going to help us to feel that our children are secure, to feel that our teachers are secure, to feel that the parents are secure, because the children infect the parents and it becomes a cycle. And this is a responsibility for all of us. Government is committed, Ministry of Health, to ensure that the vaccines get here on time and we vaccinate all the eligible or the targeted groups. So
Yes.
that is in terms of what we've vaccinated.
Okay.
But I'm happy the compliance from teachers is now improving.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Are now weighing out. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much. And I want to assure you I'm a teacher myself, and I know that teachers have always been very compliant to government programs. What only worries me is the percentage so far vaccinated, because as a teacher, when you talk of a 28% out of 100, I think that is a little too low. But I know that we shall continue to engage. So, Doctor, keep online much as you are driving. I hope you are also respecting the traffic rules, because we may have to engage you later.
You must have parked somewhere.
We may have to engage you later. So right about now, we want to invite an educationist from the district of Kayunga, and this is none other than Mr. Olok Moses, the district inspector of schools Kayunga. Mr. Olok, are you with us?
He's
Mr.
unmuting.
Olok, Mr. Olok.
Mr. Olok, kindly unmute your mic.
Mr. Olok?
Perfect.
So now that Mr. Olok is here, we are only waiting to see him.
Mr.
But we
Olok,
know.
Can you activate your video? Mr. Olok? Mr. Olok, kindly unmute your mic and open up your video. Well, while we're waiting for Mr. Olok to open that, there is a lot more feedback coming online. I really want to thank fellow Ugandans for being a part of this conversation. Online here, the conversation seems to be much more exciting. Let me start with someone here who just said, I love it when government officials are talking about strategies, execution and all that, but can we make them feasible on ground about the children? And that is Esther. Then this one says that I'm putting in consideration whatever they're talking, but can we make this a reality on ground? We need to understand how this all is going to reach us on the ground. Thank you so much, Henry. And the other person here, okay, I think this one was responding to Dr. Mungahi. Please make sure that the feedback you're giving us, you're not blaming anyone. We are finding solutions on how best we can sail through this. I think you can call back Mr. Olok to see if he's here with us now.
Oh, Mr. Olok, all the way from Kayunga. Are you here now?
Okay, they're trying to call him again. Do we have some more in the gallery?
And some of these are the challenges we definitely must expect as we go ICT, as we go on online engagement. In the middle of a lesson, one of the participants can disappear.
The teacher disappearing, and we can't get the teacher anymore.
Sure. So, yes, maybe we could engage another panelist as we try to put things right for Mr. Olok.
Do we have Lawrence with us? Maybe Honorable Flavia, if you could react to what Dr. Mugahi was alluding to. What do you make of his submission from your context?
Yeah, well, I know that from the very first beginning, the vaccination against COVID was intended for first the health workers, the teachers. And I wonder why up to now only 28% have been vaccinated. And whether that will not take us another long way for the schools to open. I'm glad that they are discussing the idea on whether vaccination of teachers would affect the opening of schools or should affect the opening or not. But I want to think it should. And I want to really ask the Ministry of Health to put on their socks and fast track that the teachers are immunized against COVID so that we can be sure that the schools are ready to open with people who are safe so that our children can be safe. So I would like to really implore Dr. Mugahi and the other team in the Ministry of Health to ensure the vaccination of all teachers, and of course to call on teachers to really be compliant, because we don't want now government to be pushing them around to force them to vaccinate when actually a lot of rights issues may come around.
That's the thing.
So let's be compliant. Let's be compliant.
Thank you so much, Honorable. We're joined now by Mr. Lawrence Banyoya, the Commissioner Secretary, Local Government Finance Commission. A very great afternoon, Mr. Banyoya. Good to have you.
Please. Good morning.
It's good afternoon, sir. It's already afternoon. Oh, it's good morning.
We're in the afternoon.
Well, you can see how fast we're going ahead of us. Now, from the local government perspective, Lawrence, we want to know, what is local government doing to enhance capacity of local government actors in resource mobilization as mandated by the Local Government Act?
Thank you, Mr. Chamagero, and the rest of the participants. I'm Lawrence Banyoya, Secretary, Local Government Finance Commission, the commission which advises government on how to finance local governments. And in this regard, especially for education, I don't know whether I should start sharing my screen now. Are you on the screen? Are you? Yes, please. Are you seeing my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. In terms of the mandate, as you are aware, the Commission is mandated by the Constitution and the Local Government Act to advise on physical decentralization issues in the country, especially for local governments. Therefore, as part of its work of the Commission, it engages stakeholders on pertinent issues emerging in the country, especially on the funding side. And in this case, as part of the annual plan, the Commission facilitates negotiations between local government representatives and Ministry of Education and Sports on the money that is going down to local governments. One of the key issues is, how do they use this money? Sorry, my thing is going very fast. One of the things to note now is that Uganda, in the Vision 2040, identifies human capital development as one of the fundamental needs to be strengthened and accelerated in the transformation of the country. Education is one of the key components of human development, and NDP clearly stipulates that a well-educated, skilled, and healthy human resource are essential. Investing in population and early child development in basic education and vulnerabilities, among other, helps foundation is a requirement of human capital. Sustainable Development Goal number 4 emphasizes equitable quality education, promotion of lifelong learning, opportunities, and skills revolution. The LGFC indeed is well positioned to discuss this issue. We believe that in the implementation of standard operating procedures in education should be tailored to the guideline before schools open. We discussed this with the Ministry of Education, and we learned that they should have printing of distance materials, which they didn't have. The school inspection was a challenge in this COVID lockdown. Consideration of special needs education was an issue for them to specially address in this COVID-19 pandemic. We also had areas of concern. One of them is the implementation of standard operating procedures in education, which must be tailored on the guidelines before opening schools. Although they seem to have done something, but when the situation came, we realized they were not ready. We also noted that they must coordinate the implementation process, including accountability for funds. The COVID-19 is not an excuse for not accounting. Accountability templates were provided to most local governments, but the reporting is still lagging behind. Ministry of Education was to develop guidelines and accountability templates to our various local governments by November 2020. You remember we started this pandemic last year. This was done, but the dissemination was also a challenge. Local governments were to ensure that each school procedures the facilities that fit in the budget of 1.5 million shillings. We realize this was done, but we don't know how it is progressing because 1.5 million was a very low base on which we based. Printing of distant materials. Ministry of Education was to liaise with Ministry of Finance, provide 51.2 billion for printing. But now that the budget has been cut, we hope this budget still stands. This is in progress. Materials may be delivered to schools. There are some schools which didn't get. Ministry of Education was to ensure that the distribution of local materials. Yes?
Carry on.
I hear a lot of echoes though. Is it? 23 billion was requested by Ministry of Finance and advised that only be defrayed from capitation, which means then capitation has to go down. Unfortunately, the process required signing of memorandums, and this mean concluded in the financial 2021-22, 2020-21. The ministry was also supposed to provide customized produce, distribute instructional materials for learners. Materials for learners, we normally make sure we give benchmarks to the sector in which to operate. Materials for learners' special needs were developed by National Curriculum Development Center. They were printed, but payment was still pending by the close of 2021. So some of these things were not done, like ministry, which was supposed to customize and distribute instruction materials, those were not done. Now, the status of implementation of the above areas by June 2021, so that they are ready to start a new year. it was clear from the performance status on the key areas that non-performance on some of the areas, like on school inspection, in local governments and task forces, could not have resulted in the spread of pandemic schools, of the pandemic in schools, because the school inspectors were supposed to be part of the task forces, but it seems in some areas they were ignored. The distribution of learning materials was also not systematic to cover the whole country for all learners. This would result in inequities in the access to education, which is counter to the aspiration of the country. Now, on the way forward, I am hurrying so that I answer some of the questions which you were asked earlier. We need effective implementation of standard operating procedures required for effective funding and inspection of schools, especially by the task forces. Distance learning needs to be reviewed, and access to learning materials should be prioritized in the funding framework. As you are aware, most schools did not get, or most students did not get learning materials. They are relying online, and yet the online is not effective, as you have heard. The special needs learners is indeed going to lag behind and needs access for the appropriate learning materials to avoid being left behind. The future of funding should take into account the following areas: the curriculum gaps which have been identified, as you have heard, the gaps in distant learning, the school inspection, which has also been lagging, especially during these COVID days. Indeed, it took a whole minister to go and inspect schools to see how ready they are. But I hope the Ministry of Education is doing much better than that. Loss of income, of course, you have heard, of teachers who have gone to borders, who have even left school, who have even left teaching, and preparedness of schools to implement SOPs. During this time, the schools should have been prepared adequately in the SOPs. And indeed, most people who have talked of school dropouts, especially as a result of pregnancies, as a result of engaging in drugs, as a result of people losing interest just because there are no facilities. So we need to bridge these inequalities in learning and the facilities. And indeed, one of our responsibilities when we are advising government is that the facilities in schools should be enhanced. And that is how we lobbied that education sector should be more funded than other sectors, especially because when we undertook a study, we realized the capitation grant was so low at about 7,000 at that time. World Bank has come in to enhance the funding of education and has gone to about 17,000 per child, just because we realized there was such a big gap. That is the gaps that need to be indeed bridged. Now, Mr. Chamagero, you were touching on how are local governments prepared in raising local revenues to fund their activities. Indeed, the law states that the Local Government Act mandates local governments to levy charges, collect fees, taxes, and other revenues as prescribed by the law. Local governments are doing their best in these circumstances. Currently, they are being supported in the following areas, especially by the central government. They are being supported in training their staff with the strategies for local revenue mobilization and generation. Of course, local governments are ill-equipped in the strategies, especially like customer care, especially like knowing their taxpayers. How do you know your taxpayers? They must conduct, and indeed some donors like the DINU, which is a program for Northern Uganda, and YouthNeed, which is a program for local government infrastructure, have given some money for sensitization, for seminars, for local revenue administration and management.
Okay.
At the commission here, we are spearheading computerization of revenue registers. When we visited most local governments, they didn't have what you would call a sensible register. They were all manual. Now we want them to computerize and make sure that they can, on a click of a button, know who is paying what, when is he paying, when is he due. So the automation of local revenue collection can improve performance and transparency. And when we tried this in the northern region of Gulu, their revenues tripled in a space of one year.
Wow.
Jinja was also another example where the revenues tripled in 1 year. So computerization and automation of local revenue registers was a very good tool for them to have predictable revenue and better budgeting. We are here now at the Local Government Finance Commission lobbying that every local government should have equipment like computers and printers so that you can retool them and establish a very viable revenue unit.
Commissioner, I'm just going to request, just for now, I love the presentation. I love the strategies that are there. I just want to request that you hang in there a bit. We got it so far. Lawrence, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, current trends indicate that the sectoral allocations to education, they keep on declining. Do you think local governments are in position to manage the primary subsector, or should it be re-centralized back to the central government?
Thank you very much. Whether it is the local government managing the subsector or the sector, whether it is the central government managing the sector, the resources have to go down. And the Constitution is very clear that Uganda will be governed on the principles of decentralization. And the primary education is one of the areas that was decentralized. And it does not mean that when it returns to the center, the funding improves. Whether the funding is there or not, the management of primary education should remain at local governments. In fact, we are advocating for more areas to go down to local governments. Although, like you know, secondary education is decentralized, but is not fully decentralized. We are happy now that money goes down direct to the facilities, to the schools. And this is one aspect of deepening decentralization. The center was given the responsibility of monitoring, of standard setting, and that's what it should do. Inspection, and indeed developing curriculum. Those are central government responsibilities.
Allow me, Commissioner.
But the local governments, being closest to the service, are best suited to manage this primary education.
Commissioner.
And indeed, yes.
Allow me to then a little bit, given that you've given that commitment, I want to know, what is your ministry's broad framework for practical interventions to stimulate education institutions through financing?
Yes, the financing, especially in my commission, we believe there is need for more financing. Okay. When we did this study in 2012-13, there was such a funding gap, which we recommended to be covered by government. Government could not raise the funding. It had to go for a loan from the World Bank of about $130 million to revamp education funding. And this one is going to enhanced capitation, enhanced school facilities, building of more schools, as you have heard, sub-counties, and this has indeed improved education outcomes if pandemic was not to disturb the progress.
Thank you so much.
The local governments, yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lawrence. Because of time, I am really very grateful you could possibly share the document with the rest of the participants in this conversation. I love the commitment from the ministry. I love the vibe, the energy that is there, and the feasibility is what I'm waiting for, and the implementation.
Sure, and I like it more when he actually puts focus on children with special needs.
Oh, yes.
Because in all these arrangements, they don't seem to be coming out properly in the picture.
Oh, yeah.
But if you plan for them, better.
It's easier done.
Yes. And maybe also to propose, in addition to Lawrence's submission, that as we prepare to prepare the learners to get back, the teachers also need some psychological preparation.
I agree.
They have also gone through their own stigma. They are going to receive children who have so many issues. So before they think of the timetable of mathematics, their mind must be prepared.
That's true.
And in the interest of time, as you've said, Andrew, we now want to call Mr. Locke. Mr. Locke, I'm sure you are online this time. I know that Kayunga is not very far away from good network. Mr. Locke? Mr.
You'll be shocked.
Mr. Locke, are you there? Mr. Locke?
Locke, are you with us?
Oh, I'd received a confirmation a few minutes ago that he's on, but I'm wondering what is happening.
Mr. Locke, are you still with us? Locke, are you with us?
Oh. And yet we really wanted to hear from Mr. Locke concerning the local government approaches, because he's a district inspector of schools and he's in a rural district. We want to appreciate what is going on that side, and we want to also know what they are doing as a local government.
Oh,
anyway.
yes.
Mr. Locke?
Okay, Mr. Locke doesn't seem to be here with us, but I know the conversation is deep. In the gallery, while we're waiting for him to join the conversation, there is something that was very pertinent. Possibly we could tap into the questions that are coming in from online. By the way, I'm very, very grateful to all Ugandans who are part of this conversation on Twitter and beyond the borders, and you're part of the great conversation. We'll skip that. That was already answered. There are those who are saying that some questions are tough. Kansime Onesma says we must cherish the complementarity of the two. High educational attainment has a positive effect on health. Good health has a positive on the education of our children. So we must not just, amplify the education while the health is not amplified. Well done. And Namakula Mai says the Parliament has a midterm framework paper that is after scrutinizing item by item that will fill up the gaps, maybe in financing and planning, just as earlier on Honorable James alluded here. Then someone says, please, teachers have always been compliant and will do so even with the vaccination. However, how much percentage has been vaccinated? We need to know how many
and
teachers.
That was directed to Dr. Mugahi.
Yes,
but
Dr.
he earlier indicated that for now it is a 28%, and there's a lot of hope. He says there's a lot of hope.
Yes, Honorable, you're saying?
Yeah, I think Dr. Mugahi had already said it, 28%, which was 152,000 teachers immunized, and then the one against the total of 560,000 teachers. Wow. So there is still a very big gap.
So if it was a teacher awarding marks, would say pull up your socks.
I'm sure there are questions in the gallery.
Have
questions there?
Oh yeah, but before the gallery, I saw a question that came through the chats, and this was directed to Mr. Mgendawala. Doctor, I think you are there. Somebody wants to know what practical means will be put in place to support parents who are IT illiterate, and who feel they should support their learners, but they don't know where to start from.
Majority.
Yes, who are even the majority. But quickly in the Q&A, I see Elizabeth. Could we hear what the Minister of Health has to say on family planning? Dr. Mugahi didn't answer that question. And Doctor, I want to imagine you are there. And then Faith Uizue, I think, is wondering where the children will get the data from if we are going to go digital. I don't know who is going to answer that. And an anonymous attendee is asking whether there is any special consideration for education in emergency. Like Lamo, education materials were received only once, and not all the children received. But beyond the emergence also, I know there are challenges of access. And then Grace Paul wants Dr. Richard to, with many teenage girls pregnant, some engaging in unsafe abortions, is government considering the issue of legalizing that area? Ambrose, Mulangira. So I think that's where it ends for now. So
let's start with Doctor on contraceptive, on reproductive health.
Just a quick check on Olok. Olok, are you on?
Well, I understand that Dr. Locke dropped off. Okay. These are the challenges of the ICT we're having as a country, and we need to address them. We have lost Dr. Locke. I think we should go to the rest of the panelists to respond.
Okay. So then we move to Mr. Mgendawala.
Yes.
Sorry, I keep calling you Mr., but I know you're a doctor and you really earned that title through sweat. Dr. Mgendawala.
Dr. Mgendawala, are you still with us?
I think the practical one comes back to ministry. How practical is it? Those are just planners.
Okay.
They give the
Dr. Mgendawala, are you still with us? Okay. Dr. Hamisi Mugendawala?
Possibly we return to Dr. Mugahi if he's on.
I think you go to the other doctor.
So Dr. Mugahi, are you on? Oh yes, please quickly react to those questions that were specifically forwarded to you in the next 1.5 minutes.
Dr. Mugahi, unmute video. Dr.
I have unmuted, sir.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, I did only pick the last few. I had engaged something. The issue of legalizing abortion is not something that we are thinking about. We still strongly think that we have not done enough in educating the young people through our various channels and mechanisms, and bringing all the stakeholders on board to ensure that we prevent the unwanted pregnancies. Prevention of unwanted pregnancies is very critical, and this can be done by ensuring there is adequate information given to the teenager. Also, policies and guidelines are not for family planning commodities, but we are saying family planning information. Information about contraceptives, information about sexuality education in schools, as like one honorable member had mentioned. So I think in line with what I was asked, that's what I was able to pick, Henry. Unless there's something very specific, I could answer to that immediately.
There was another one that was specific?
Okay, maybe this one wasn't specific, but you'd have an idea that parents have realized that talking to their children about their sexuality is not a cup of tea. Can we have publicized forums that help parents with these aspects? Because this topic greatly disrupts a child's education. So as a doctor, is it a disruptor? Yes, Dr. Mugahi.
Henry, I can hear you. I can hear you. That in any education that we give to the child, the parents are very important stakeholders. But you and I also know that most of the learning about that we give to the child, the parents are very important stakeholders. But you and I also know that most of the learning about that we give to the child. I think there is a great interruption in terms of an echo in the background. But I would strongly think that having the parents also on board is very critical. But we want to engage the parents through also schools as the entry point, and cultural institutions. Most of these teenage pregnancies are happening in communities. So we have not done well in engaging making communities safer for our adolescents and young girls and homes.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think around this time I'll allow the honorables
Over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Doctor. At this time, I'll allow the Honourable still in the studio to give their very last remarks before we can engage Juliet. Juliet, I know you must be online and ready to take us through the concluding remarks. So just in a while, Honourable James and Honourable Flavia, any last
I want to thank everyone who participated in this very, very critical, important subject. And I pray that we continue to engage on it. And my last observations and really the concluding remark is this: if we are not careful, this health crisis may turn into a child rights crisis.
Yeah.
And so what the children's world will be like tomorrow, and actually what their future would ultimately be like, should be our concern and responsibility today. We should foster a Uganda that is fit for the children.
Wow. Sure. Wow, that is deep.
And what a wonderful summary of our events this morning. James, Honourable James.
Yeah, thank you very much. Since we are talking about the child, I would like to stress that at the end of it all, this discipline from home. And in a way, you are dealing with somebody who is just developing. He's not a fully-fledged person, not complete. And that's why the element of too much liberalism and too much democracy has a disadvantage. So I, as a teacher, I think when we are modeling these children, sometimes we try to have some artificial toughness, but the results are very clear. So I'd like to implore the parents that the issue of too much liberalism when it comes to discipline, I think they should be part and parcel of this developing of this child.
Sure.
That's as far as that is concerned. Then the other one is, I'd like to implore our fellow legislators, and especially now the Committee on Education and Sports, which is having its first inaugural ceremony, or they are trying to do some orientation as I speak now, that when it comes to figures and the midterm framework paper, that's where all our efforts must be. The issue of us running to the cameras before conclusion is done, we end up lamenting in plenary.
True.
The moment we all put efforts together, because in a way there is no blame game. We do the policy analysis of the policy statements of the ministry, we make a proposals in good faith. And the issue of the ministry and then the parliament coming as if they are going for a battlefield, we are serving the same human being or same person, the common person. So I'm just calling upon the members to have that dialogue. Technical staff, if you come to parliament, you are not coming to war, but the others who come with a mind which is already fixed.
Oh yeah.
Legislators,
very biased.
When these people appear before you, they are not coming before court and you are taking them to the gallows. They are coming, you make ideas, and these ideas end up benefiting our population. So thank you very much.
And after all, the children are for all of us. I think they are the uniting factor, whether Muslim or Christian, whether this political party or the other, children are a common denominator. So, Andrew, I think we are getting to the conclusion of this very wonderful debate and conversation.
Yes,
and would like to invite Juliet Namkasa from International Aid Services Uganda to give us those closing remarks. Juliet?
Juliet, unmute. Juliet, unmute. Juliet, can you hear us? Kindly unmute.
And I can see that she's online and ready, but I don't know what is.
Yeah, at times I think she could be held up. Juliet, can you kindly unmute your mic and we can hear you?
Yeah, at times.
Juliet?
Hello.
Yes, we can now. Can we see you? Can you open up
Hello?
your video?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Juliet, but we can't see you. Can you open your video?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
This is Juliet Namkasa, Country Director, International Aid Services Uganda. And I would like to appreciate... Hello?
Carry on.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Carry on, Juliet.
Okay.
I think, Juliet, we're only missing your video, but when you talk, we hear you loud and clear.
Very much so.
And we have a few minutes to wind up this session.
Juliet.
I would like to appreciate all our panelists for the great discussion. It's been a great day, a lot of learning, and we have shown as a nation where our priority is. And when we talk about securing our future, we are looking at our children, we are spot on. It's been very important to know that this is not a one-man show, which is very good, and we're looking at a multi-sectoral approach. Thanks so much for bringing that one up. And also appreciating the fact that we are committed to putting our resources where our priorities are. And our priority is the future of the nation, which lies partially in the security and education of our children. The divide between the poor and the rich, the urban poor, the rural poor, and at times we think that we have the urban rich. No, we also have the urban poor, and we also need to pay attention to those. The dialogue continues, and it's important standing right from the Parliament or the President's office up to the village person in the community. We have a role to play in securing the future of our so much. Let us continue with the fight. Let us build our nation. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Juliet, and that brings us to the end of this conversation today. I want to thank our panelists from the different walks of life. Thank you so much, the honorables that graced us this early morning, and you being with us here for all the 3 hours. The participants who have been with us online, and you've been a part of the conversation, those on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, the government officials. Not only that, with our development partners, we want to thank you so much. We can't fail to thank our World Vision, Uganda, thank you so much, Save the Children, UNICEF, Oxfam, and not forgetting Education Advocacy with the Difference. I'm Andrew Chamagero, and I really want to thank you for the parents who have been following this conversation. Don't just listen, follow up these issues from the district level, parish level, and play a role as a parent. Till next time, that will be tomorrow. We'll have the same conversation because the dialogue goes up to tomorrow. Reflect today, and then tomorrow when we get back, you'll actually be fresh for another conversation. Good afternoon.